What's up, MMA fans? I know it's been a long time. I haven't done an MMA related video since Ultimate '08. Wow, that's been a while, and I think that was last year. So it's been 3 months. It's been, wow, a quarter of a year, almost. Way too long. And a lot happens now in the sport. I mean, if you look at the way the sport has grown ever since I started doing the videos back in '06. You look at the cards coming up. The UFC is like 5-6 cards deep with fight nights and Ultimate Fighter finals and pay-per-views, and then you look at the Strikeforce acquisition of the Elite XC, what was left of them, and that's a good thing for us, because I kind of miss tuning into Showtime and watching those Show XC fights, and they put on some pretty decent shows. Granted, it wasn't on the level of the UFC, but still they had a pretty good product. You get to see some decent fighters, Nick Diaz, Frank Shamrock, Robbie Lawler, who I really enjoy watching, and possibly Carano and Cyborg will fight in that organization. It's going to be interesting to see how they handle Kimbo. Is he a guy that they're going to main card? Is he a guy that they're going to co-main event? I think that was obviously Elite XC's ultimate undoing. Was Kimbo was the guy that they featured and made him the face of their franchise, so to speak, and it kind of led to their undoing. Well, just one of many things, but probably a good reason why. The UFC obviously has been putting on card after card after card, and will continue to do so. Japan Dream's been putting on some okay fights. World Victory Road. So there's a lot of alternatives now, and you got cards already into late summer. So just today, Griffin Forrest's return fight against Thiago Silva. So both those guys coming off a loss. That should be a good fight. But I'm just going to recap kind of stuff that happened ever since I did my last video, and then following this video I'm going to do 2 prediction videos. So I hope you guys enjoy it, and here we go. Obviously, Affliction had their second show. Fedor Orlovsky, and even on a night when Fedor definitely didn't look like himself, and definitely looked like if there was ever a night that he could lose, could have been that night. But again, just a testament to how great the guy is. He ends up knocking Arlovsky out, and to be quite honest with you, everybody was criticizing Fedor a lot after that fight, but he didn't look any worse for the wear after the fight. He didn't look like he had taken any clean punches. He definitely wasn't marked up badly in any way. I think he was more marked up after the Hungman Choi fight. He had like a bunch of like abrasions and shit on his forehead. And definitely after the Crow Cop fight was where he took his most damage. I think if you've ever seen a Fedor after a fight and you saw him after the Crow Cop fight, he was in a bad way face wise. But again, Arlovsky tried to highlight him, and in turn got highlighted with a overhand right from hell. So, and also on that card, Vitor just demolition Matt Lindland. Oh my God, I was legitimately scared for Matt Lindland, because he was knocked out for well over 5 minutes. The guy just was not moving, and when he was trying to move, he was almost stiff. He was still, but prideful athlete like himself, an Olympian. He wants to walk out, and I don't blame him for that. He was able to do that, thank God, and hopefully he'll be okay. But I think Vitor has definitely found a home at 185, and for those of you who saw the interview after the fight, and you saw him standing next to Tito Ortiz, a guy he fought at light heavyweight 205, you were like, holy, what the hell, these two guys fought? Tito looked huge compared to Vitor, so I think Vitor at 185 is reborn. I think he's refocused, especially he had so much drama and so much agony in his life with the events surrounding his sister, and I'm sure you guys all know that, and unfortunately it didn't turn out good for him. But I think he's refocused his career, refocused his training, and I think in his case he's legitimately reborn in that weight division. But that overall was a good card. Barnett just basically beat Gilbert Yvel pretty bad for better part of 3 rounds. I don't know how Yvel was able to survive as long as he did. Definitely, if you saw his face after the fight, it was a mess. His lips were swollen, his face was marked up, and Barnett had some marks too. He definitely did not want to stand with Gilbert, and any chance he got, he took him to the ground. But now it sets up Barnett Fedor, so we should be seeing that in July sometime, and that would be a great fight. Obviously, if the consensus is there's one heavyweight that could give Fedor a fight and have a legit shot at beating him, it's Josh Barnett. And onto the UFC shows that have been done since Ultimate 08. I'm just going to run through those real quick. Franklin versus Henderson at 93. That fight, razor thin fight, razor thin. I personally had Franklin winning the fight because to me, he controlled the fight in his stand-up. He made Henderson want to take him down. Henderson was getting picked apart by Rich during parts of that fight, and Rich stood up with him, which was very impressive. And Rich was really picking him apart on the feet, and it made Henderson want to take him down. Outside of the one big shot Henderson landed in the first, it was pretty much Rich's fight on the feet. And on the ground, Henderson really didn't do much damage, and then the eye poke in the 3rd round really just put a stop in the action. Rich had to have surgery because of it, tore his retina. So, but I had Rich winning the fight, very, very close decision. But Dan, he's a tough guy, a tough competitor, and it's hard to dispute it either way. You could give reasons for both those guys winning that fight. And the fight before that was Shogun and Coleman. And of course, Shogun got a ton of criticism after that fight. But come on, the facts are facts. The guy's coming off 2 major knee surgeries, and he hasn't fought in a year and a half. Ashley had a torn up knee going into the Forrest Griffin fight, and that fight seems like it was ages ago. So it's hard to criticize a guy that's coming off those kind of injuries and that kind of time off and try to correctly assess his performance. But he still won the fight via knockout. Coleman is a guy. I hate saying this about a guy like Coleman because he's a pioneer in the sport, and it's a guy that's basically lived his life with MMA the last 15 plus years. And I think it's just time for him to find something else to do, whether it be training guys, running a gym. There just comes a time where sometimes somebody needs to step in and help protect these guys from themselves, like a Ken Shamrock, who's lost his last 10 plus fights, and he goes and beats this big humongous fat kid. I think his name was Ross something or whatever. Then he gets caught with steroids and he's been suspended for a year. Thankfully, somebody has to protect them from themselves, and it just gets to a point where some of these guys in their career, they lose, they're getting up there, they're losing frequently, they're getting knocked out, and it just gets to be dangerous. But anyway, it was a decent card. 93. It wasn't earth shattering. The biggest permutations from that was who was going to coach the Ultimate Fighter against Michael Bisping. That was probably the biggest thing that was going to come from that. Then we went on to 94, which was billed as a huge card with GSP and BJ2, and the whole Vaseline scandal came out of that, and it was clear that GSP was getting the good rub down in between rounds. I don't know if it would have changed the fight outcome per se, because it was just so dominant. I think George hit it home where BJ really needs to stay in the 155-pound weight class. He's a dominant lightweight. I personally think he's mission impossible in that weight class, and I know there's a lot of people that have jumped on that Kenny Florian bandwagon and whatnot, but I just don't see him having the game to beat BJ. I don't see him knocking BJ out. I don't see him submitting BJ. So that's just my personal opinion. But yeah, GSP, depending on what the outcome is with the Nevada Nevada State Athletic Commission. Hopefully we get to see Alves and Penn later on this year. Of course, Machida solidified his place as the #1 contender for the UFC light heavyweight title. He just knocked out Thiago Silva right at the end of round 1 with a huge right hand coming through the guard, and just that was it. And it was obvious that Silva wasn't making it back to his corner, and he won that fight. And I thought he should have gotten the title shot. I don't think there should have been any dispute with Rampage and whatnot. That was more of a popularity contest, I think. Rampage being a more popular fighter, it's easier to put his name with Evans and make it a more sellable pay-per-view. But with the Lesnar Mir fight happening to be pushed up because of Mir's injury, they were scrambling, so they were able to. I think they got the fight right. I think Evans and Machida, that fight was correct. I think it's the right fight. Then after that, we got to see Diego Sanchez make his 155-pound debut. He definitely didn't push the pace like he does at 170, I think, because of the weight cut and just a new feel for the body. 15 pounds is a lot of weight. Day before, I mean, that's a lot of weight considering what he maybe used to cut. There was a lot of he says that he didn't cut any weight to make 170, and all of a sudden I read stuff that he's cutting 30 pounds to make 155, and so you never know what's the truth and what's not. But anyway, he won the fight pretty decisively. I think the commentary during the fight was pretty accurate. That Joe, he's a good fighter in a great weight class. That's the unfortunate thing about Joe Stevens, and I think he's just unfortunately a little too big to make 145, because at 145 I think he'd be a wrecking machine. I think he'd actually be a very, very hard guy to beat at that weight class, and he'd be fighting guys more in his range, more in his, because he's a short guy. He doesn't have quite the rangy reach of some of these guys, and he's just a good fighter in a real great weight class. And I think Diego's going to add to that great weight class. I think he'll get better as he continues to make the cuts. Definitely a good addition, and it's crazy. You look at a lot of these guys that were Ultimate Fighter competitors. They're competing, 15, 30 pounds south of where they competed on the show. And that's the only thing I don't like about the Ultimate Fighters. I wish that these guys would just compete at the real weight classes that they're going to compete in the UFC, but then again, they have to take fights on such short notice on the show that they have to carry around that extra weight. Nate Marquardt fought Wilson Govea on that card. That fight, it was very shocking to me. I thought that Wilson was going to win. If I would have had to predict the fight, I would have picked Wilson, but Nate, you got to say that this guy Winklejohn in the Jackson camp has really turned these guys up. They're striking. He's jacked their striking up tremendously. I mean, you got Rashad Evans, he's knocking out Chuck Liddell. He's stopping Forrest Griffin. He moves a lot. He's very elusive, and it would annoy you if you were fighting him, because you can't seem to find the guy. Then all of a sudden he hits you with something. You're like, holy shit, there he is. Same thing but Marquardt is a completely different story. We had seen Marquardt for a long time, and he always was a good fighter, not the great fighter, but a better than average fighter. And now with this, seems like this just newfound striking that he has, it's made him a hell of a lot better. And to stop a guy like Wilson, who I think beat his teammate at 205, didn't beat him, he gassed, but he definitely gave Keith Jardine a hell of a fight. And the fight with Talis Lightus, with the point deductions, there was no doubt that Marquardt won that fight. Marquardt, he beat the hell out of Talis Lightus for 3 rounds and still lost the fight. Dan Hardy fought Rory Markham on that card and ended up knocking Markham out. I think Markham was kind of a tailor-made opponent for Hardy. He's a guy who wants to stand, plant himself. He's not going to put a lot of movement. He just wants to plant himself and throw a big shot. And Hardy was able to, while backing up, evade a shot and then throw a big left hook and just totally knocked Markham out. Well, he's going to get to fight Marcus Davis on an upcoming card, and I think that's going to be a really good fight. 96, we got to see, I'm sorry if I'm being too long-winded with this thing, Jardine, Jackson. A really great fight, in a fight that I thought Jackson was going to totally knock out Jardine. I really thought that fight was not going to go past the first, and then when Jardine got past the first, I was like, okay, now we have something. And it just keeps going back to something I've said about Rampage since the beginning. He just doesn't fight well as the guy who's picked to win the fight. He's not a good front runner. Rampage is best when he's underestimated and when he's doubted and when he's the underdog. It's just, anytime you think Rampage should lose a fight, he's the guy that's going to go in there and knock a guy out in the first round. But anytime you pick him to win it, he's going to go out there and give a performance. But, Keith's a tough guy. He's not a guy who's going to take a backward step. Even though he was backing up in this fight, I don't think he was too eager to get punched in the face by Quentin anymore. And who would be? And he knocked Keith down like 3 or 4 times in the fight, and I think those knockdowns, coupled with some of the damage, especially the knockdown at the end of the third, is what put Quentin over the top. Gabriel Gonzaga losing in the first round very quickly to Shane Carwin after he rocked Carwin. I felt he rushed in there a little too fast, was a little too eager to clinch with him and take him down. I think he should have tried to keep his distance and throw some more shots. I think he would have been able to stop Carwin, but instead Carwin catches him with a little short right that just buckled Gonzaga, and that was it. And it was a big reffing controversy in this card, obviously. First was the Shane Nelson, Aaron Riley, where it was a crazy stoppage from everything I read. I haven't got to see the fight, but then the Pete Sell Matt Brown fight. After, I'll get to the reffing, but Pete Sell is a guy that I think really needs to find either a new place to train, or maybe, I wouldn't want to say find something else to do, because I like Pete Sell, and it's getting to the point where he's getting knocked out so badly in his fights. He won his fight prior to this against Berkman, but you go back before that, and Nate Quarry, Scott Smith, Nate Quarry before that. I mean, the guy just gets knocked out, and he gets knocked out, and in this fight, Matt Brown just completely dissected him. He just tore him apart, and it goes back to this reffing thing that I'm going to address, and everybody gets on refs. Oh, the guy let the fight go. The guy stopped it too soon, similar to the Josh Koscheck-Paulo Thiago fight, where the UFC, Dana White, Lorenzo Frankfurtita, these guys have worked so hard, Mark Ratner, trying to get this stuff sanctioned, trying to get it legalized in states, trying to push the sport. To have a guy go in there and, per se, take a few extra shots that he shouldn't take just for the sake of letting him try to win the fight and recover. Koscheck was out. He wasn't going anywhere. He was on his back. He was like lifting his hand up, but he was going to take a few more big shots. And per se, let's say he took those shots and ends up in the hospital with brain damage, becomes a vegetable, or even worse, dies. That totally would destroy everything that the UFC has worked for. Everything. Because there are tons of right-wing conservatives out there, people that are dead set against the sport and want to see it banned, and still don't want to see it grow and aspire. So I think you definitely have to err on the side of caution with fighters, because you live to fight another day. What is 2 punches compared to the rest of somebody's life? Nothing. You definitely want to keep the guy from getting killed. And in the case with Sell and Brown, the ref, he hung Sell out to dry. Sell was done. Like, that guy had no business taking at least 6 or 7 of the shots that he took. And you could even see Brown saying, he felt bad about doing it. And that's saying something. When you got an opponent in there saying, look, I don't want to hit this guy anymore, he's out. And Sell is a tough guy. He's going to continue to try to fight. It's just in him. So, I don't know. It's something that they're going to have to rectify, and something I hope the UFC gets squared away soon. But until then, you guys have a good one. Take care. I'm going to do some prediction videos right after this. Sorry if this was so long-winded, but you guys take care.